All right, well, I appreciate each of you coming here. I typically don't like to do training in the summer because everybody's crazy schedule, but we've just found the rhythm of everything has been completely shifted and changed for a while here with COVID, and we just certainly feel this half burden, half passion to get some things refired and get some things removing, and certainly our ministry teams are a key piece of that. So we're going to record this, and I know a couple of you aren't going to be here next week. Some of the ones that aren't here this week will be here next week, and that's the nature of summer training. So that part is good. I've told some of you, but the reason, a particular reason for the timing is that this week we're going to start a new series. And in that, we're going to ask people to just make some core commitments. And for some of them, it's a re-engagement, really, in some ways, probably for the first time after COVID. We've just watched so many people shrink back in some things. And certainly some of that was even true before then, right? And so one of the things we're going to do on the 1st of August, which is the fourth one in the series, we're going to ask people to put their life into play into ministry again, to serve on teams. And so it became important for me because we made a shift here about a month ago, and Drew took a couple other responsibilities, and I took the ministry teams as a responsibility. And we're going to ask people to get back involved and get back engaged, which is going to put, hopefully, just some positive pressure on you in a good way. Because what I wanted to do, and what we're going to do for tonight and next week, is just kind of frame up some thoughts and some paradigms in preparation for, what are you going to do if on August 2nd you get a note that says, by the way, I have 10 different people that now want to serve in your ministry. It'd be a great problem to have, right? And actually that's what I anticipate exactly what will happen in some of these cases. And so my hope is just to frame up some things that will help you look at your ministry area in such a way that you're ready when people say, hey, put me in, and you say, okay, here's where we need you, right? So that is the big picture hope, leading to a very specific time frame here in a month, a little less when we're going to ask people to sign up to serve. Okay? There's a couple things I'm going to ask you to do between now and then. So I started on page 4 a list for you, and then I left a number 3 because you will probably want to add some things to it. And I'll mention one of those specifically and allude to another one tonight. May add a couple more things by next week for you. But they're things I'm going to ask you to do because I think they will help you prepare for that. One of the things that it just, as a general piece, and all of you are different levels of engagement. Some of you are new in ministry leadership. Some of you have been doing it a long time. But we really have to capture the scope of what we're doing and who we need to do it so that we can give people meaningful ministries to do and ask them when they have that openness in their life and in their heart to engage, actually give them something to engage in and be able to clarify for them what it is we're asking them to do and why. So that's the nature of some of what I'm going to ask you to do in the next month or so. Okay? Now, as we think about creating a culture for serving, right? We have a lot of people that are watching right now, okay? And the crazy part is some of the people who are watching right now used to be the ones that were serving, right? And so we have new people that we need to engage in ministry. We have older people that we need to re-engage, either in the same or different ministries. But we need to ask everybody to engage one way or another. And the good part about how we do ministry in terms of our values, when we talk about our core value of people serving as they're gifted and equipped, is someone can actually serve in the unique way that God created them. And they can serve in the area they want to, not just because we're strong-arming them that everybody ought to do something, as much as this is what I'd like to do. So our hope is that as we move past August 1st and beyond that, that you actually have people on your team that like feel called to the work that you're doing and gifted for that, and that you'll spend time working to equip them for that so that they just have a personal fulfillment in what they're doing. Like I'm where God wants me to be. I'm doing what God wants me to do. And there's also just a fruitfulness to that, right? We all likely probably have even been like that square peg in the round hole, right? And we've been in a place that doesn't fit us. Most of us probably at this level now have learned to say no to the things that don't fit us so well, hopefully. But that said, we probably always likely have people that want to join us in our ministry area that might not be fit for that. And so we'll talk about other things like how do we deal with conflict, how do we deal with when we got the wrong person, all that kind of stuff. Just, it's in a kind of an abbreviated but pretty packed 2 nights that I have planned. And so it's going to be heavy on the teaching part, less on the interaction amongst us part, just because there's a lot of things I want to frame up for you. That said, I'm always open for a conversation about any of these things with you, and happy to engage in that. So I put extensive notes. Some of you are note takers, some of you have probably turned it over by now, and so whichever you are, I'm just going to walk you through, but I don't have any slides, so you really got to pay attention this time. There's no sheets up on the screen for you, okay? So when we talk about ministry leadership at our church, what I want us to understand, and this is part of what your homework is for this month, is that each ministry is connected to our mission. Okay? We don't just have a ministry because somebody says we should have a ministry. We don't just do things because someone said, well, that's what the church should do. It's just this foundational concept that says everything that we collectively do as a group of people should be leading us to making disciples who make disciples. And tied into that mission. So in that we talk about missional living, meaning living on purpose and serving on purpose. We want to make sure that everything we initiate, if we start a new ministry, everything we invest in our staff, that we promote or that we staff with volunteers, all fulfills the mission of making disciples who make disciples. Okay? Which means that you, as a ministry leader, either on your own or with the help of one of us, needs to be able to articulate to people how what you do helps to make disciples who make disciples, right? So when someone comes on August 1st and they see, that Karen's doing the cookie ministry, and they say, so tell me about the cookie ministry. Well, one of the things I want Karen to be able to tell people is how that contributes to our mission of making disciples who make disciples, right? And if in the end, like if we, between us, can't figure that out, then we figured it out, haven't we? That's probably not a ministry we need to be doing, okay? So that's later on your list of to-dos, but if they know that, right, that's part of what makes ministry meaningful. If I can tell how what I'm doing while I'm volunteering, how I'm giving my time, whatever way it looks like, because it's going to be different for a lot of different people. I'm working toward the mission of the church. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so we're going to work on accomplishing that in our descriptions for our ministries. The other thing that I think, well, I have lots of things for you. The next thing, is probably the better way to put it, is that when we do ministry, we really are representing Jesus in ministry. Okay. There are times when we talk about being the hands and feet of Jesus. Okay? Not too uncommon talk in our church world. I think it's a good tie to the 1 Peter 4 passage that I put in your notes there. And it's really kind of what I'm landing on just tonight for our main passage, where Peter writes, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and power forever and ever. Amen. So, as we discuss mission with those that we lead, as we're talking outside this room with our various teams, we certainly want to also in that talk representation, right? Because when someone serves at Night to Shine, they may not be from our church, but they represent our church. You know, when someone serves in various capacities, they may not even yet be a follower of Jesus, but the people who are watching, they still represent Jesus. And so it's important for us, even as we have people all along the wheel of maturity, right, and growth things we looked at, to realize that that doesn't matter to anybody. What matters to somebody is this person represents Troy Christian Church. And so we just want to make sure when we talk to our teams that we're telling them, listen, we're the hands and feet of Jesus, yes, in what we do, but we also just represent him to others. And I think that's, like, it adds so much significance to what we're doing. It's not just that we're mowing the grass. You know, it's not just that we're delivering the cookies. It's not just that we're changing the diapers. It's not just that we're handing out communion. It's not just that we're singing a song on stage. It's not just that we are fill in the blank, right? I mean, there's significance to what we do because what we're doing is facilitating the making of disciples. And I think, like, if we could really hone in on this particular piece, right, people would understand that I'm representing God and I'm representing church and this is significant what I'm doing, then eventually we get to a place as a church where people start to connect with us and they start to feel like, now this feels like home. Like, this feels like a home that I could be part of because I'm loved, I'm cared for, I'm treated with value, all those things that Jesus would do to our guests, to our members, to other people that we serve with. Those are the things we need to be doing as well because we represent him to them. Okay? Now, some different attitudes. We could talk a lot of just a whole couple hours about leadership attitudes, right? We could talk about good ones and we could talk about bad ones. So I want to just give you three that I'm going to ask for you just to commit to personally and ask your team to commit to as well. Okay? And one is just that we treat people right. Okay? Matthew 23:11, Jesus said, the greatest among you will be your servant. In Romans 12:10, honor one another above yourselves. We have to be servants before we're anything else, right? Because that's the heart of Jesus, and that's who we represent, as we said earlier. So we treat people right as leaders, and then we just ask them to replicate that to the other people that we serve. So, you know, when you're leading your team, when you're serving as the leader of the team, when you're just serving, you are modeling. How do we treat people? And if we can replicate that in our teams, then we will do well. But they'll do it better if they see it in you first. Okay? Second thing is that we always do our best. Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Probably a little more familiar to you, Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for men. Like this has always been like an important theme. If you've heard me on this before, you've heard me say excellence is important. I hope you've also heard me say that, like, we're never going to be perfect. Okay? And if our people are doing 9 things out of 10 good and all we do is focus on number 10, then we're not leading very well, right? But are they doing their best? Are we giving God our best? Are we modeling that to people? That's what I think excellence does. You know, God just deserves my best. And sometimes my best just, you know, isn't quite up to what I would hope it would be, but it was still my best, right? And I mean, I felt a bit of that like for the last 6 months or so after Christopher. Like, God, you can have all what's left, but sometimes I feel like there's a lot left, right? And I've watched through most of you at this time. You know, we've done enough life together. Go through those seasons yourself, and so like God knows that, and God's good with that. But we just need to be good with still giving God our best, whatever that looks like at any given time. Okay? Again, example, modeling, communication to our team, all important parts of that. And again, I think one of the reasons we ask people to give their best is because we've already told them what we're doing matters in eternity, right? I mean, we've got to make that connection to people. Why what we're doing is significant. When I know it's significant, I'm more likely to give my best. If I feel or am made to feel either insignificant myself or that what I'm doing is insignificant, I'm a whole lot less likely to give my best to it. Okay? And then the third piece is just that we give glory to God. Right? Whatever you do, eat or drink, Corinthians 10 says, do it all for the glory of God. Certainly that's a transferable principle, and I think 1 Peter 4 talks to this as well. Okay? We work hard to give glory to God. We don't make it about ourselves. Right? That's part of the gist of 1 Peter 4 then. And yet I've watched, and you probably have too, right? People come into the church who struggle with their value. And they've decided this is a place where they're going to make a name for themselves. You know? I don't have anybody to boss around anybody else, but so I'm going to find someone to boss around in the church, right? That's not giving glory to God. And if that's you, then we need to talk. Okay? But I don't know of anything, otherwise we would have talked already. But let's just make sure, I know most of your hearts, right? We don't care to make a name for ourselves. If we can make a name for Jesus, that's why we do what we do. And as long as we keep that straight, then I just feel like that's the attitude that we're looking for. And same thing, sometimes we have to put our arm around someone on our team and say, listen, I know you're struggling with this, but this isn't about you. This is about what we're trying to accomplish, or this is about, this person that we're trying to serve, this person we're trying to love. And sometimes it's, maybe you need to take a step away for a while. Or maybe it's just a reorienting that because you built a relationship with a person on your team, you have the ability to speak into them, and speak into their life and say, so, tell me what's going on, because this isn't you normally. Those type of things, right? Okay, so I put D on here with not really a trepidation, but just a little bit maybe, that I just think it's important we talk about being called to lead. Okay? If you're leading a ministry, I think it's important that you feel called to lead that ministry. Now, what I don't think is healthy if you have to lead. We've watched people that we'll talk periodically about sitting in the first chair, which is the leader, and how that needs to rotate periodically based on skills or ability, talents, experience, knowledge, all those type of things. When you find someone who's always got to sit in the first chair, they probably may not belong in the first chair, right? Because that's someone who's either struggling with value or control or those type of things. But in general, we got to feel called to do what we're doing, and so that first means we're a servant of God, and that God's called me to do this, and then it's a servant of people. That said, there's also a time when the leader has to be the follower, and if you're, I think, a good team leader, you realize, and we'll talk about it in different ways tonight, that there are just times when God gives other people on your team a vision, a passion, an energy, an availability, or something, where you say, you know what, I'm going to take second chair and you take first chair on this. And part of that's training other leaders. Part of that's just recognizing that God calls certain people for certain tasks. I might be called to lead this ministry, but there might be pieces of it that there'll be somebody who will be a whole lot better to lead than me. And so I'm the leader of it all, but they're the leader of this. And that's just empowering, right? So if we have that sense of it, then they'll have a better sense of it. If we have the ability to take the back seat or the second chair, then they'll feel much more comfortable and like it's a normal thing for them at times to take that second chair. Okay. That said, again, it's important that we believe that at this time God has called us to lead in whatever particular ministry. Okay. And I understand there are different levels of that calling, right? There are calling because I feel like this is what God wants me to do right now, and there are callings like this is what I have to do right now. And there's everything in between that. That said, it needs to be part of why we do what we do. Okay? And then the next, talk just a minute here about feeding ourselves as leaders. Okay? So beyond being led by God, we also know that it's really important that we're also fed by God. Okay? You can't give to others what you don't possess, in other words. Jesus said in John 15:5, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Right? So, I mean, you can't give what you don't have. And there's always a danger, especially for doers, that they keep doing and never spend time just being a child of God, right? And we've just watched over the years that they dry up and they burn out and they get empty, you know. And most of us that have a tendency to be doers, like most of us have experienced that personally, right? Certainly I have. Especially when I was younger, I got a little smarter, you know. But this, I mean, it's just the truth. You're going to dry up and you're going to burn out if you don't focus on your own soul care. Right? If you don't spend time investing in your own relationship with Jesus, your leadership will be probably short, and it's probably not going to be very fulfilling ultimately, because you're going to burn out. And sometimes when you get in those patterns, you think, man, this church has just burned me out. And the truth is, it wasn't the church at all. The truth is, like, you just kept doing and doing and never took time to really engage Jesus, who's the reason we do it all in the first place. So when you think about leadership, when you think about the things that are required or necessary for us to function as leaders, like if that isn't right up there at the top of your list, continually engaging God in a personal relationship and building that personal relationship, then you're going to struggle, right? And the truth is, like, if it's not modeled, your team might struggle as well. Because, I mean, if they follow your example, then we might have a whole team tank. Because they're, you know, monkey see, monkey do, you know, and just not healthy. So remember that you feeding yourself is part of being a disciple. And there'll be times when you're asked to feed your team, and that's part of discipling them. Okay? And then letter F, invest in relationships. Just a foundational piece of ministry leadership is that we lead through relationship. That we've got to build relationships with the people that God has called us to lead. And again, we're in different stages there. But this is the piece that's critical to all we do, because discipleship is all about relationship. And we'll talk more about this next week. But again, just think about when we're talking about recruiting, we're talking about training, we're talking about communicating with our team, we're talking about handling conflict, all those pieces. When we talk about how to celebrate with our team, all of those things only bear fruit in ministry if we have first tended to the relationships that are on our team. Does it make sense? Okay. All right, so making disciples is about building strategic relationships. Making disciples who make disciples is about multiplying strategic and healthy relationships. Again, if we will model this for our teams, you know, and some of you are like multi-layered. I think like Becky is multi-layered in her teams, right? And so she's modeling that to her team leaders, and her team leaders are modeling that to their team. If it breaks down in the process, then that call doesn't hold a lot of weight, right? We don't see us doing that as well. So, and like the good part is, like, I love the people that I serve with, right? I mean, there are many times over the years that I would say, like, I get as much enjoyment from being with the people that I serve with as I do whatever I'm doing serving, right? And if we can get that piece clarified, relationships still are hard at times, and there's always going to be some that are just difficult at times. Like, there's a balance to that, you know, that I really enjoy the people that I get to serve with. And so that, I hope that's true of you as well. But if you're going to build your ministry area, you got to build relationships. Most of our recruiting is done from a basis of relationships. That's where we often start with, is you watch people recruit, but then most of our retention is based on how well we are able to capture those relationships with people and how well they feel cared for and valued and all of those type of things. If the relationships are strong, recruiting gets a whole lot easier. if the relationships are non-existent or taxed, recruiting gets very difficult. So again, part of that's just doing life together, and sometimes we get to do a lot of life with people, sometimes we get to do a little life with people, depending on schedules and how all that rhythm works. But let's not lose sight of that particular part, that the relationships are really foundational. Okay? All right, any thoughts, ideas, questions so far? We have three little pieces, or big pieces, that I want to tackle tonight, and that's one of them. So it's kind of just an umbrella about different things, just some overarching principles, values we want infused into our ministry teams. So we give those to you here. All right, number 2 then. What we ask for and offer to our ministry team leaders. So this is as a church, which often translates to as the leader over the ministry teams, okay? But it also translates into sometimes you all to your team. So I think 2 important partners just to talk about. So I like to give our team leaders a lot of responsibility, okay? Which sounds like, oh gee, thanks, I appreciate that. But it's not my intent to micromanage our different ministries. It's to give them to you, to let you help them thrive, and then support you, encourage you, and resource you for that to happen. That said, you also find with the responsibility that I also want to give you a lot of authority, right? So that you can carry on things, so that you can plan things, so you can dream, and so that you can vision. So we make sure our ministries line up with our mission, and then try to free our team leaders to just do ministry in their own different areas. Even though each relationship looks different, each one of you is going to need different things from me or from the church in that way. That's okay. But like if God has called you in particular to lead this ministry, okay, then God has called you to lead this ministry. Not to be another version of me. We don't need me leading all the ministry teams. We don't need my personality, my gifts, my attitude. Especially my attitude sometimes. We just don't need that all the time, right? But we need you, and we need you to lead it. And so everybody's had some different experiences as to what that looks like. But that's certainly the goal that I want to move us toward, where you feel empowered to take some things and run with it. I know my budget, I know my plans. Let's put our heads together. Let's make sure we're all heading the same direction. And then tell me what you need. Tell me how I can help, not feeling like you have to ask each step of the way for every decision that you're going to make, type of a thing. It's just not my style at all in that. So, but I think those are important partners. Like if you give someone responsibility, then you also got to give them authority to carry out that responsibility. And so hopefully we'll be on both those pieces strong. And then the main thing I want to talk about here is just involving your people. Okay? 6 ways that we can let the people who serve with us invest in our ministry. So that isn't just our ministry. It's our team's ministry. We have people who just own what it is we're trying to accomplish. So the first is just simply invite your team to add value and develop best practices. I think this transfers great in ministry areas, but we all look at things just a little bit differently. And sometimes that's frustrating if you're a person who just says, just do what I tell you, or just do it the way I tell you. And the truth is sometimes the way that we tell them may not be the best way. Or there might be a whole something that we're missing. Now if that's an ongoing, constant conversation, that's just like a dripping faucet and very obnoxious. But if people don't feel like they can speak into the ministry they're being called to serve, they're probably going to step out of the ministry that they're being called to serve in, because they're just a hireling. They don't have any ownership to it. You want to give people ownership by asking them to add value, by figuring out together if there's a better way to do something that we're doing, because oftentimes there is. And so, again, we're not just going to ask them to carry out our plans. We're going to ask them, what do you think? What do you think how do you think this would work best? And obviously that, that can get very long and monotonous if that's all we do. But there are times we just need to make sure we're open to that happening. So that said, like we probably have all experienced someone who's come in to save the ministry, or take charge, or, just let me do it myself, all that kind of stuff, someone coming in who's not the leader. And we'll talk about handling conflict next week as one of the subsets that we're going to talk about. But don't let that scare you from giving people the opportunity to give input. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Different way of putting that. Number 2, give ministry ownership to volunteers. I love to watch our ministry leaders give ministry away. I love when, I don't love it when you're not here, but I love it when you're not here and it doesn't matter, because you've got a quality team that's doing what they need to do. When crisis happens and someone steps up because they're part of the team and they know what we do and they know why we do it, they know how we do it, and so we just carry on. There's a lot of freedom in that for a leader. I'm not talking about being irresponsible. I'm not talking about being lazy. Not asking you to leave your people vulnerable to someone who might do them harm. Just asking them to feel, giving them empowerment, that value for them. So God has resourced you with people who can share this ministry with you, and He's called them to share this ministry with you. Our hope is that you feel called to lead this ministry. And our hope is that you have a team full of people who feel called to serve in the ministry that you're called to lead. Right? And so if they do, and God has, then why not empower them? Why not give them some ownership to that ministry so that they feel like it's theirs and not just yours? Okay? That said, like we all have people say, no, I'll just show up and do my job. I don't want to own anything. But hopefully we grow them into people who really love what they do and have a vision for what they're doing in ministry. Number 3, resource people with ideas, tools, and with people. Okay? One of the most effective ways to invest in our ministry is also to invest in our people. And so whether you find for them, articles or websites or books or videos, seminars or other people, that type of thing, feed them with some things going to help make them better or give them a greater vision for the ministry that you're participating in. And if you really want to be successful at it, invite them to feed the whole team. Invite them to be looking for the same thing, isn't it? Wouldn't it be good if you had a half a dozen people that were looking for ways to grow this ministry instead of all that falling on you? If we have owners, that's what happens, right? And if you give that away and share that, that's what happens. Okay? I feel like some of the things I wrote are just obvious, but they're so obvious I don't want you to miss them. So that's the next one. That we receive just this incredible personal blessing, right? When we know that we're growing someone in ministry. If you've been around long enough in a certain area and you watch someone grow up in your ministry, someone who said, I'll give it a try, who now says that's the only thing I want to do. This is where I feel most fulfilled. This is where I feel most fruitful. I think that comes sometimes when we resource our people. Right? We give them the why, we give them the vision, we demonstrate for them the passion, we empower them to take ownership of the ministry, and all of a sudden they're growing in their life, right? And if we think about like our wheel, and we'll bring the wheel in probably next week, but you think about the spiritual infant and the child and the young adult and the parent, right? I mean, that person who's moving into that young adult piece because their eyes are off of them, that doesn't mean we get them as young adults. Okay? It also doesn't mean that they're not going to revert back at times to children or to infancy. But it also doesn't mean that if we don't invest in them properly, that we could move them forward into spiritual adulthood, right? And they come in as a worker, and they grow into a leader because we're growing them in things. And that just personally is one of the most exciting pieces to me, to just watch someone that I get to walk with just come alive because they found an area and they found a culture that they can thrive in personally, which means they'll likely thrive spiritually, which means they'll likely become able to then give that away to somebody else. And that's what we want to happen. Okay? One of the things just that's really important, and probably one of the most missed, right, is recognizing and encouraging our volunteers, number 4. Okay? What are they doing? How are they doing it? Is what they're doing above and beyond? Is how they're investing special in some way? Do they know that you think they're good? Do they know you think they're awesome? Do they know they think you have even more potential than what you're doing? Do they know that you love it when they're on the schedule because you know things are going to be done so well, or people are going to be loved so well, or fill in the blank? If they do, that's great. If they don't, we always run the danger of burning them out, or them feeling like, does anybody really care that I'm doing what I'm doing? So it's important to note on those things. It also, like if we're doing that piece, it sure makes it a whole lot easier to offer constructive criticism, right? When it's balanced out by, they've told me nothing but good, and there's a little bit of shock when you say, hey, I need you to think about this, or I need you to work on this, but there's a base there. You say, well, I really think they like me because they, I really think they think I do okay because they've told me that half a dozen times now, so it's a little bit easier than to take it when they say, "Are you having an off day today?" Because they probably are, right? Because you've watched them, and it's okay sometimes to come just alongside somebody and put your arm around them and say, "What can I do to help?" Because I can tell that right now you're struggling, and there's validation in that for them. And I think just like when you think about recognizing and encourage them, like you know them well enough that you could have did you care about their marriage? Did you care about their kids? That you know enough about them that you know what's going on in their life. Good example of this, just a couple weeks ago, I was talking with Yerwins. He was telling me that he has an employee who has a daughter that plays on the Bradford girls softball team, and they just won the championship, right? And he said it was just such a fun day when after that weekend he came walking into the plant, and I was just able to celebrate his daughter's victory, right? I thought, he knows what's going on with his people. That's exactly, and ours is such a smaller scale than what he's asked to do at ConAgra, but nonetheless, it's the same principle, right? You care, but the people care about you. You want to know that they're tracking with a part of your life, and so committing to leading is more than just committing to doing a task. Okay? It's also committing to connect with the people to accomplish a task. Okay? Don't lose the people in the task, or things will get out of hand pretty quick. So know your people, encourage your people, recognize them, and I think we'll watch them thrive under our leadership because that relationship is strong with them. Number 5, remain open to new people serving. Okay? Not a huge issue currently, because we're looking for more people right now than we have, but it's easier to say it now and easier to say it maybe when it's not an issue, but sometimes if we're not careful, we get in this rut of the same people doing the same thing, and there's not a place for new people. There's not an opening. Oh, so-and-so's done that for 10 years, that's just their thing. That's a bad thing. It's at least not a healthy thing. It's good that they own it. It's not good that they won't share it, right? And so we need to make room for new people, partly because there's new ideas, partly because there's new blood, and partly because there's just new eyes, right? When the same people are doing the same thing over and over again, we do the same events, we do things the same way, we just lose track of what we do, and it's so easy to go on to autopilot. I come in, I do this, and I leave, and just repeat that. But new people, sometimes say, why? Why do we do that? Well, what about this? Well, have you ever thought of this? Don't close your hearts and your minds to that happening. In fact, I would just tell you to proactively recruit new people for your ministry, and you find that it continues to thrive because there's new blood and there's new eyes and there's new energy in your ministry. Okay? And then communicate success stories and celebrate victories. I think this is super important. I also tell you it's like one of the weakest pieces just for me personally. Right? And I know there are times when I need to recruit people to help me with things that we all do, right, that we're not as strong at. And for me, this would just be one of them. But like when was the last time you looked for someone doing great? When's the last time you highlighted someone who's doing well? When's the last time that you celebrated a success in your area? When's the last time you just celebrated new people on your team and introduced your people to someone new who's serving in that way? All communicate messages. And then I think also just building your team. You know, did you know so-and-so has a new grandbaby? Yeah. Or did you know so-and-so took a fall this week and they're going to be off the team or out of commission for the next 2 months because they were in a cast? Or did you know? Keep your team engaged with one another in some of these ways. But the bigger piece is, like, when someone hits the bullseye in your ministry, like, celebrate it, okay? Highlight it in that way. When there's fruit born out of the work of your people, then communicate it, So Sherry and I were standing in the back of the worship center on Sunday, right? And a couple comes in. She's like, we sent them a note this week. And we've been tracking that, right? I mean, Sherry comes in for half a day every week and sending out notes, and we're tracking who's been gone a while and who hasn't had a touch for a while, and that's not unusual, is it, Sherry? That we sometimes see those people when they get that extra touch, right? So we celebrate that when they come in. We have a shepherding report that tells us how many weeks someone's been gone. And this week somebody went from 20-some weeks to 0 weeks, right? Because they came. And they came probably in part because they got a note this week. And so we celebrate that, right? And that's the kind of stuff that we want to highlight with our teams. When we get it right, let's celebrate it, because we don't always get it right, And because we're working with people, there's some people we'll probably never get it right with, because that's just how people are. But let's cheer our teams on when they do well, and help them remember, like, that's not just a you victory, that's a kingdom of God victory. Because everything we're doing is to make disciples who make disciples. And if we can inch someone closer to who God's called them to be, then that's a success that we ought to celebrate. Okay? Any questions on that, number 2? Okay. Hang on tight, one more to go. So I want to talk a little bit about recruiting. I'm hoping that on that Sunday, August 1st, that we're going to have a number of people that are going to say, sign me up for, and we'll actually have some things through this whole series for people to fill out each Sunday. But that particular Sunday will be a little bit different. They'll have all of our ministry areas, and you know how some people are. Like, some people are going to check 5 boxes, right? And it's like competition's on. Which one are you going to hit them first and catch them and capture them with your vision and all that type of thing. That said, the other 9 times out of 10, oftentimes we're recruiting for our ministries. Like, we're looking for people to serve, which we ought to in that way. But this is what I know. Okay, you and the people who serve alongside of you in your ministry, you are the best ambassadors for your ministry. Like, if you don't have a greater passion for your ministry than someone who's not serving in your ministry, then we might need to have a conversation, And then we need to build that in our team. And so it's just natural. Like, lots of ideas go through my head, but I think about that crew that works the parking lot for Night to Shine. Those guys recruit well, right? Because they love what they do. They're full of energy about it. They have a good vision for why they do what they do. And it's fun to watch them, right? But that ultimately should be true of all of our different teams, because because we just have a passion for what we do, and passion begets passion, and so we draw people together. So, you've recruited these people, you've trained them, you've cast a vision for them, you shared passion with them. Sometimes we just need to release them. Listen, we're too short on our team. Go get them. Go find me 2 other people who will love people the way we need to love them through our ministry, who will, fill in the blank on that. So we have our best people putting their lives into play because they know that what we do matters. Our particular ministry is important, and they're going to communicate that to other people. So as a leader, for sure I want you to accept your role as an ambassador for your ministry. But I also want you to just commission a bunch of other ambassadors from your team members. You don't need to do this all yourself. The other thing I would just remind us is, like, when you're recruiting for your ministry, okay, I want you to reproduce yourself, but I don't want you to clone yourself. Okay? I mean, we don't need another you, and we don't need another me. One's enough, right? But we need people to compliment us, like, not words, like needy compliment, people to add value and come alongside of us and be strong where we're weak, and share a passion for our ministry and share a vision for our ministry. But they don't necessarily have to do ministry the way we do ministry, and it might even be better if they don't do ministry the way we do ministry. Again, if you're not a person who's great at celebrating, we don't need another one of those. We need someone who is good at celebrating to be your partner in that. So recruit a variety of different people for your ministry areas. God uses different gifts in his people all the time, and different types of people connect with different types of people. I mean, you're going to connect with some, but you're not going to connect with everyone. Different personalities reach out to different personalities, so yours is going to get some, but I guarantee all of us have people that think our personality is just a little bit off. They think, if I was going to spend a few hours with someone, that probably isn't the person I would spend it with, but maybe with someone else on your team, they're like, hey, if I could get to hang out with them, that would be really good. And different skill sets are needed to accomplish different tasks, right? All that makes sense? Okay. So think about that when we think about who we're going to recruit. So just, again, so I can maybe just give you different things to think about. People on your team. People on your team that are task focused. They just want to get the job done. Like, those are helpful to have. If that's the whole focus of things and we're missing people, not good. But isn't it great to have somebody who just wants to, sometimes put their nose to the grindstone and get something done? Because sometimes that frees us people to do people work, right? And that's a good thing. Some people are people focused, right? And we need them on our team because we want the people on our team to feel cared for. And so that people focus becomes important. Like, some people are visionaries. And they're good because they keep reminding us where we're going, why we do what we do, why what we're doing is important for making disciples who make disciples. We want those people on our team in that way. And some people are just spontaneous and fun, right? And they will drive some of us crazy, but that's a good thing, right? Because some of us that aren't as spontaneous and fun need to be driven crazy in that way, right? And we need, like, if you're not, you're probably not going to be the one who's going to infuse that in your team, right? But you need someone like that on your team. So find those kind of people as well. The melancholics among us, like, we track details and numbers and statistics and job descriptions and put that person in charge of your schedule, right? Because they'll thrive in that and all those details. Leverage everybody for their strengths, so that's part of how they feel their value. Instead of trying to make them into someone that they're not, use who they are in a special way on your team. And in that way, we have a team full of engaged people. They're committed to a meaningful ministry, and that ministry is yours. Okay, and that's, so if I can just make a little bridge for you, that's why I'm going to ask you to do it. The number 2 that's on your list. I'm going to ask you to start defining the people that are on your team and what they do. Okay, because not everybody's going to fit, and you're going to have people that want to serve, and you need to know what you need, and you need to know if anybody's transferable on your team. Well, this person's really wired to this, so let's put them here, or we're gonna move this person over here. I mean, that's your job as the team leader, is to lead those things, but you gotta know what you need, and you gotta know who you got, and what will make that work, right? I mean, it's a different person, likely, who is going to, you think about our large worship team, right? I mean, some of the people that are running the slides and the sound don't have any desire nor any business probably on being up on stage, right? And some of the people who are up on stage probably don't have any business back there in that sound booth. You don't want me back there. Like, I tried that once or twice, I'm like, you know, I mean, like, if I'm paying that much attention to the words, I can't worship, and I'd rather worship, so just take me out, right? But there are people that will just thrive in that area, so let's get everybody in the right places in that way. But what are those places? That's the piece. So, you know, Steve, you're running the safety team. You know, what do we need for that? And what's that involve? You know, we got, I don't know, probably that thick of a manual that tells all those things, right? But if we can condense that down to a knowledge where you say, here are the pieces that we're missing, and here's what we need, then we'll be ready when people volunteer. So recruiting is a task, right? But recruiting the right people to serve in the right place, that's the task of a good leader. It's not just we need a body. I hope we moved past that a long time ago. Certainly, you know, years ago in the church, that was, you know, if we could just get someone to fill a spot, we felt good because all of our spots were full. And we just watched that people really struggled, right? Because they're in the wrong spots. And so we just, we grew up in that way in our thinking. So, again, find people that compliment you. Don't get people that are just like you. And when you find people that are different from you, realize that probably could just be a good, healthy friction, right? I mean, there's unhealthy friction. I can give you examples. I can even give you names if you want. You know, type of thing. But there's a healthy friction, right? Where I know that someone's not wired like me, but it's such an asset that they're not like me. And so I come to appreciate that, and I learn to grow into that way and see the beauty they bring that's so much different than what I do. So when we can get there, then you just have a healthy team that's made up of a bunch of different people. Remember, 1 Peter 4, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. God doesn't wire us all the same. And so if he's the creator and the designer, and that's what he's purposed to do, then we need to trust that there's wisdom in his purposing to do that and go along with it. So just a few specific things I want you to know with related to recruiting. We'll move through these pretty quick. Number one, we want you to recruit people with an option that allows them to try out a ministry and then make a commitment. I want you to think through this before August 1st, because I think that's important. Sometimes people are afraid if I say yes, then it is a life sentence. You know, I'm not sure if I'll like this or not, but if I knew I could try it before I said yes for long term, I would do it. So give them a chance to try it before they say yes for long term. And also, you might find it's helpful for you periodically when you say, ooh, I really need to pass their name to so-and-so because I don't think this is a good fit. You know, I mean, we watch that, right, in student ministry and children's ministry, Next Gen. Watch people move periodically through that because they're like, give me those older kids, and they're like, give me anything but those junior hires, right, type thing. Just because everybody's wired different. But how do they know sometimes unless they try? So give them an option to try, because, you know, you recruit them, and this is like really strong for me, but let God bring conviction about where they serve. Okay? I mean, many of you have been recruited by me in one way or another over the years. And standard for me is to say, listen, I think you would do great at this. I think this is a good spot for you. But I don't know everything going on in your life, and I don't know anything about you. And so, no is an okay answer. Because just because I think you're the right person for this doesn't mean you are the right person, or that now's the right time, or those type of things. So, God is the one who needs to ultimately bring the conviction that this is where he wants them to serve. And then you can just reinforce that and love on that decision, you know, or bless them and say, you know, like I have many times, okay, well, if it's not me, then who is it? You know, It's okay if you're gonna step away from my ministry, but what ministry are you stepping into? Because what I don't like is people stepping away saying, I'm just gonna go on vacation for a year from God. That's not healthy. And if we have a relationship, we have to be talking to our people about that. But you know, when someone says, I'm gonna step away from this because I'm taking this other responsibility, okay, people change, things change, that's okay. With a partner that then, letter B, after a reasonable amount of time, ask people for a real commitment to serve in your ministry area. Listen, you've done this 2 or 3 times now, does this feel like a good fit? You know, don't assume they're gonna give you a year because you haven't asked them for a year. Don't assume they're gonna walk away after 2 times because you said, hey, let's give it a couple times, then we'll talk. So give it a couple times and then talk on that way. And then just make sense out of what makes sense for you and what makes sense for them to fit into your ministry area. Letter C, we're gonna ask people to make a commitment to serve for a year at a time. So this would be, to my knowledge, this would be new for everybody in the church here. So what I'd like to do, because so much of life, for a good portion of our families, really rotates around a school year, you know, or football season to football season, whichever way you like to look at it, is let's think about, by the 1st of September, asking people to commit for a year, okay? And then what that means is come next August, we're revisiting everybody on our team and asking them if they still feel called by God to serve in this area and feel productive in it, which gives them an out. If they don't, it gives us an out if they don't. And it gives them a chance to say, no, this is what I really feel God's calling me to do on a regular basis, like intermittent, like every year, instead of being 4 or 5 years down the road and like, I don't know, I guess they just assume I'm gonna do this forever, you know, type thing. And again, having talked to many people over the years, it's not been an unusual piece for us to have people come to our church because they had to escape from their church. I mean, they were doing something and they got more and more and more piled on them, and the only way they could get away was to leave. And that's really sad. I mean, I've talked to many people who've come through our doors over the years and said, you know what, why don't you just be a follower of Jesus for 6 months? Let's not talk about doing anything, you know. That said, well, I don't want any of our people leaving because we've just taken them for granted or piled more on them. So let's just make sure that we review that commitment with them. And I think the factors that lead to being fruitful in ministry, that can change, right? So I put that in your blanks because just a reminder, physical factors change, passions change, family factors change, energy level changes, vision changes, you know, and sometimes like those change together. We watch people that really want to be involved in children's ministry, and then all of a sudden they don't have any children, and they're like, so I think I want to do something else because I really wanted to be involved where my kids were involved, but that's changed. Or it could change in any number of ways. Just realize that it changes sometimes, and that's okay. Again, that's the time to have a question like, I understand, so what are you going to do next? What area are you going to serve in now? That's good to bridge them into something else. This kind of goes back to where we started at the beginning, but as part of the recruiting piece, make sure you give them a complete idea of what your ministry accomplishes, why it's important, how it helps to make disciples who make disciples. And that's a review piece, but when you're recruiting, it's great that all your team knows why you're doing what you're doing, but it's also important that everybody coming onto your team knows why you're doing what you're doing. So make sure you give them a complete idea of what your ministry accomplishes and why it's important. Okay? So cast vision from the start, right? If you put your life into play in this ministry area, this is how it's going to help the kingdom. And the truth is, if you do that well, you probably have a better chance of getting that person who signed up for 5 different ministries than the person who can't do that. So I'd work on that one. And then letter E, know if there are certain requirements established for ministry in your area, abide by those things. Right? Is a background check required? Membership required, becoming a member for a certain period of time required? I would say know those things. Certainly have a conversation with me if you have questions about those things, and then trust those things, right? I mean, I've watched lots of times as people they've come into the church, they have a lot of energy, and they want to get them plugged into something right away, right? Which is okay in some areas, but in some areas, like, we don't even know what you believe, so I know you want to be a teacher, but seriously, let's do some life together first, right? I want to just know where you're at and what you think and how you believe and what you've been taught and all those kind of things to know if that's a right spot for you. And again, that's true of different things that we find. And sometimes obviously those very requirements are what keep everybody safe, right? When we're like, you don't pass the background check, children's ministry is not the spot for you. I know you weren't going to tell us about that, but we could have a private conversation about that, right? Because that person doesn't belong there. And that's certainly happened before. And the other part I would just tell you, like, I learn a lot about people by first explaining to them what's required and then seeing how they respond.